Now we move on to our first panel of today, and this is looking at A3, analytics, automation, and AI, and what they're worth to operators in the mobility space and beyond. And this session is going to be moderated by Amy Cameron, who is Principal Analyst at STL Partners. Amy, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much for having us, and really looking forward to hearing contributions from everyone who's with me today. So we've got 40 minutes. We're going to try and cram as much in as we can. I will be taking questions from the audience as we go along. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and I'll put them to the panel while we're going along. Won't try and make you wait all the way till the end. So without further ado, I'm Amy Cameron, as Annie kindly introduced me, and let me introduce the panel. So first we have Dr. Mariam Kaynia. She's VP and Director of Architecture, Strategy and Analytics at Telefonica Deutschland. Next, we have Robert Kennedy, and he's Converged Performance and Analytics Manager with Vodafone Ireland. And then last but not least, we have Assaf Aloni, and he's Chief Marketing Officer with Continual. So I'll let them each introduce themselves in a little bit more detail as we go through, rather than starting with introductions. So what I'd like to do is kick off with Mariam, please. I know that at Telefonica Deutschland, you guys are going through a big digital transformation, and that is feeding into the analytics that you're trying to build into your operations. So I wonder if you could start off by giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself and to this digital transformation that Telefonica Deutschland is going through.
Happy to. Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. First of all, I will start with a very brief introduction. As Amy mentioned, I'm Director for Architecture, Strategy and Analytics, meaning in my role, I have a responsibility for our enterprise architecture and solution architecture, our technology strategy. I have all the data analytics, as well as all the technology tools that comes with it, and all delivery, project management, and transformation management. And there are two elements, I think, in my role that is relevant for this forum and this panel. One is indeed the digital transformation, which we have kicked off at the beginning of this year. And I'm leading, so I'm happy to explain a little bit more about that as to your question, Amy. And a second part is, of course, the analytics function, where we are trying to strengthen this as an organization in general. So in the context of these two, I will explain a bit the projects and programs that we currently have at hand. So starting with your, go ahead, Amy.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to tell us about the digital transformation element first.
Perfect. I will start with this. So our digital transformation is about revamping and completely changing out our entire BSS landscape. We have a very legacy landscape, which comes from a long history of acquisitions and mergers and also not investing in transforming, to be honest. And therefore, we have quite a complex landscape. Everything from the core BSS all the way to channels are intertwined, and a lot of bespoke applications. We have today about 6 stacks, which also means 6 times of deployments each time you want to do anything into your systems. So our main goal here is to simplify this overall landscape with 3 objectives in mind. One is improving the customer experience. Secondly, we want to reduce the time to market to deploy new products or new functionalities. And thirdly, we want to improve our costs. And with this in mind, we have designed this program, which we call the Architecture and IT Transformation. To be honest, it's not only this, it is really a business transformation as well, because you can't do this in isolation. It goes fully hand in hand if you want to achieve proper digital transformation. And therefore, as a company, maybe a better wording is company transformation, we have defined a set of levers that we are going to implement within the next 5 years. The next 3 years, 5-year contract, 3-year transformation, apologies. Maybe I briefly mentioned what these levers are, Amy, and then in case
go for it.
Further interest in any of them. So number one, as I mentioned, we are consolidating our stacks. So we are moving over from 6 stacks over to 2 stacks. Secondly, we are changing out some of our core BSS systems with state-of-the-art solutions from the market that are allowing for more configuration-based deployments rather than customizations or new deployments every time. Thirdly, we are doing an extensive cloudification effort. And we're talking here about approximately 80% of our workload moving over to public cloud.
And those are your IT workloads rather than networking workloads, just to clarify?
Our cloud strategy is across network and IT. So actually, we recently changed our whole organization to go together and no longer differentiate between network and IT. So all the functions I mentioned, for example, are across network and IT. Yeah, so we are, maybe I should have started with that. We're part of the technology unit, meaning I report to the CTIO. So really, we don't differentiate. The 80% I mentioned now is indeed in this transformation focused on the BSS load. However, the strategy of moving extensively towards public cloud also applies to our network workload.
Okay, great.
The fourth lever is microservice architecture. And finally, the fifth lever is business simplification. And this is really critical. Otherwise, you can just redo or replicate all the same complexity from one system to another. So in order to really get proper simplification, it's important to also simplify from the business.
Okay. So quickly before I turn over to the others, I mean, how do you see this transformation feeding into the analytics journey that you're going through and, supporting any, key bottlenecks or challenges that you're having in implementing AI and automation in the business?
I think there's one part, I have to say, I think analytics is broader than just the digital transformation, but there is indeed one part that goes hand in hand. So we are shifting, or we're doing all of this in order to serve the customer demands. And if you look at the market and the customer needs, customers are requiring more, let me say, individual specific needs or demand. They want to have everything tailored to them. Now, if you start deploying, we have 50 million customers. You cannot start deploying every single requirement into your systems. And this would simply blow up your whole IT landscape. Therefore, it goes very much hand in hand with the digitalization and simplification of your IT landscape, in parallel with creating this omni-channel experience and the analytics that we use in our channels. This would be, for example, next best action. We take all the data from the customers. We also link it to our network data, and we find the best offering towards a customer. And here you can really go on individual level without having to change or deploy everything across the landscape. So that's where I said the analytics fits very nicely together with our digital transformation. But analytics, I mean, as you all know, is of course not only this. We also have other technology-specific use cases. For example, how to roll out network more optimally based on the value you get from your customers, or predictive maintenance or automation. So there's a lot more to analytics than just the customer-facing and digital transformation-based analytics. Okay.
Great, super. Thanks for that intro. I think, to get an idea of, deep dive on what some of those other use cases are, I'm going to turn to you, Robert, now, because I know you guys are doing some quite interesting stuff in Vodafone Ireland. So maybe I'll just, hand over to you and let you introduce yourself and sort of the key initiative that you guys have been working on around analytics and AI in your networks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy. Absolutely delighted to be here this morning to talk to you guys. So in my role, we're responsible for the performance management of the network, the optimization of the network, and I suppose the digital analytics of our services and how those services are performing. So really, it's about trying to squeeze everything we can out of, how we can manage our customers from a mobility perspective and give them a better service. To manage the traffic and the load on the network and how we can respond to our customers' needs and demands and improve that service for them. And also, how can we learn from behaviors on the network and use all the data we can gather, knit that data together and give us a really holistic view of what the customer wants, and then use that kind of view to drive an improvement in experience. As the customer will need it, So really that's what we're looking to do, or my, I suppose, strategic view on it is to move away from the traditional view of looking at the network as this kind of a static entity that we've rolled out and it provides a service, to look at the network as a more dynamic entity where the behaviors on the network are driven by what our customers are doing and what they want to do and what they want to see more of in terms of experience, and be able to use, I suppose, intelligence and automation to respond to those needs and really kind of close the loop on that and have a kind of a dynamic way of managing our customers' needs and giving them a better experience. So I suppose that's really it from our side, what we're doing at a very high level.
When you're talking about dynamic, what does that mean? But does it go from you had a static network that you optimized once every, I don't know how long to how long, like how much more dynamic has it become? How much more frequently are you optimizing the levers on your network to give that better experience to customers? And what specifically are you, are the elements that you're targeting that will improve the experience?
Yeah, so I suppose to give, my view on it is that when I look at it, I'm trying to move away from the traditional view of network performance. So looking at, traditionally we would have looked at maybe how is the network performing and using maybe industry standard KPIs, video KPIs from our vendors to move into, well, how is the network behaving in response to what our customers' needs are and what they're doing. So there's a slight difference there in terms of, I suppose, the approach, where previously we would have been utilizing very event-driven KPIs, for example, has a call dropped or not, you know, and the traditional view of that being a call drop is a bad thing, we need to focus on this, whereas instead it's looking at, well, what is the customer's experience of a call? Is the quality very bad? Are they seeing leakage from one technology to another technology? So moving away really from network performance indicators to more customer experience indicators. And then taking that information and I suppose multiple strands of different information from different points of the network. And for the first way, starting to harness that into, you know, a really usable view and learn from that data and start making decisions about the network in almost real time to manage changes on the network, to maybe preempt some quality issues or preempt some traffic or load issues as they start to occur in the network, and really kind of smooth out the bumps in the road for the customer before they start hitting them, as opposed to maybe previously in mobile network operators, we would have been reviewing statistics from the network and then saying, okay, this is what happened. What we're doing now is taking all the data we have, training that, looking at it and saying, well, this is what is going to happen under these set of behaviors in the network. And here's the actions we need to take to minimize the impact on the customer.
And so, no, it does totally. And so in terms of sort of where you see this going next, sort of what's your end goal? Is it, I'm from what I'm understanding, maybe this is some in data that's currently held in the network operations team. Are you aiming to share this more widely with the customer facing teams? You know, to what degree, you know, maybe the end goal is something more around closed loop automation. What are you guys aiming towards?
Yeah, so I suppose it's very much a kind of an evolution that's in progress, and we're constantly identifying new interfaces within the network where we can take information from and blend it with the more traditional radio information that we have, and then use that in a really, I suppose, enhanced way. So some of the guys in my team, like the engineers that would be quite strong in trying to fix problems, have always said to me, if we can see something, we can fix it. That's always been the motto. If we can see it, we can fix it. I think up to now, with the traditional view of radio networks, we've maybe only seen 70% of the picture. Now we're starting to see that extra 30% from maybe different interfaces in the network on the core side, and we're bringing that signaling data through, merging that with the radio data, providing a blended output on that. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see behaviors that is happening, you know, in an end-to-end sense. You know, for example, if you're dealing with now a service like voice over LTE, and you have maybe multiple virtualized interfaces or components in the core that are part of that call flow. Previously, that data of the performance of those nodes would have been looked at separately. How is that node performing? Separate to maybe the radio interface. How is the radio interface performing? And you have a set of guys on one side of the road looking at their backyard and saying, okay, everything looks okay. And then you've guys maybe in a completely different department saying there's something wrong with this call flow. I'm seeing abnormal events over here. But people maybe, I don't know if silo is the right word, but maybe not completely joined up end to end. So now when you can bring all that information together, and the key, I suppose, to all this is to be able to knit that data together. So the call flow that's happening in the IMS or on the PCRF or whatever that node may be is linked very clearly to something that's actually impacting a customer out on the radio network. And all of a sudden we can start to make decisions about, well, when we see this type of behavior, maybe there's loading in certain parts of the network. We can start to move things around dynamically, maybe shift traffic between layers, maybe shift traffic between carriers and technologies, and all of a sudden the experience becomes completely different. You preempt these, I suppose, not roadblocks as such, but we can preempt these bumps in the road that, like, you know, previously we would have looked at after the fact and said, oh, that's what happened there, you know. Whereas now we're looking at the information, learning from it, and taking steps to manage that.
Exactly. I mean, I kind of, you know, obviously you and Mariam are, you know, very different parts of your organizations, or maybe different, you know, different views of the organization, but ultimately aiming towards a similar goal of breaking down those silos in order to get a more holistic picture and ultimately to deliver a better customer experience. So I want to pick up on sort of, obviously one of the words that was coming up while you were chatting, Rob, you know, was to, you know, preempt what is that issue that the customer is going to face. And I know that Assaf, this is something that you work in with lots of different telecoms operators. So I wonder if we can hand over to you and get a little bit of an introduction to Continual and sort of your role in this part of the industry, and maybe an understanding from your perspective of, you know, what is this prediction really for? What is the end that it's going to deliver to operators that they should be working towards?
Absolutely, Amy. So hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity also to sit in on this panel. I'll say a few words about Continual. Continual is a provider of analytics and optimization solutions for mobility and connected mobility more than anything else. So we actually we work with carriers to look at what the road and the highways and the railway experience of their subscribers are. And this happens at a nationwide scale. So every subscriber that moves gets actually accounted for in our analytics. And at the end of the day, we provide the operators with, first and foremost for the engineering teams, a clear snapshot of what the network today looks like for different mobility scenarios, judged by multiple key performance indicators and our own key quality indicators. So that's our role as a specialist in the domain of connected mobility. And I had the marketing for Continual for the last, actually from the day it was born. And so to your questions, actually, the prediction is certainly one capability that I'd like to speak about. But I want to explain a little bit about the mobility challenge and the reason why we thought this would be quite an interesting value proposition for us to the carriers, and in turn to their own subscribers and enterprises that work with the carriers on their connectivity. So in fact, this is a big data world, a huge big data world. So on the one hand, massive amounts of data. On the other hand, the algorithmic approaches and advances all the way into deep learning have created an opportunity for us. And we identified a business problem that emerges from technicalities of the network. And the business problem is if the carriers don't have their network in best shape possible for mobility, then for one thing, the customers that are on the move will experience degradations, clearly cause for dissatisfactions, and then from that point onwards, the road to mind the pun, the road for deserting or leaving and choosing different providers is shortened. It is also much about the automotive benefits and the revolution that happens in complete parallel to this conference. There are conferences in the automotive domain, and they're busy discussing the features, the capabilities, the safeties, and much of that also relies on connectivity. So while helping the carriers to get roads in better shape for the subscribers on the move, they're in best shape possible to also win contracts from the automotives. And that is why we looked at the challenges of how to model, how to forecast, how to actually project exactly what happens on the roads. And the challenges, and we've applied the machine learning for that, are that on the one hand, the cells and the sites are not that distinguishable while there's movement going on. So the cells and the sites, which are the infrastructure for servicing those customers, they're not really well told in typical domains, especially in typical data sets, especially while movement is happening. The second thing is that we're talking about really big subscriber data. The nature of our analytics change the events of every subscriber. So we're looking at a complexity that is now amplified because we're looking at tens of millions of subscribers of subscriber base of the largest providers. So we modeled all of that under the under some machine learning model called the hidden Markov model. And here we find the matches between where a subscriber has happened, and out of the millions of events that we spot, we find the matching patterns between where events took place and where the assets of the provider are. And from that point onwards, it is actually a short distance for us to project what the roadmap, what the map looks like as far as traveling routes, as far as journeys. So it is a complex graph search problems. We thought this would be of immense value to the operators in the way that we solve it and then provide actionable results and seeing what the network is in real time for these millions of subscriber base of the subscriber base. So that's on the analytics opportunity for us.
I want to jump in because we've had a question from the audience, which I think relates to this closely, is that, you know, telecoms operators, and probably Mariam, I want to come back and get your opinion on this as well after Assaf's, is that operators have spent over the last years a lot of time ingesting all of their huge amounts of data, pulling it together, and then I think a lot of time sort of struggling with how do I make sense of this? How do I figure out what do I do with this data? How do I, you know, create something valuable and useful and act on it? And they've hired data scientists and the data hasn't been in a state that the data scientists could do anything, and some of them have left. And, you know, I think this whole challenge of how do you get from this really big valuable source of data into something actionable and useful in the right amount of time, you know, what's different now than a few years ago? What is going to make this easier for operators now than a few years ago? So you, Assaf first, and then we'll hear from Mariam, please.
So the approach we went for is, of course, not to, they have already the tool stack that operators already have. To some extent takes good care of automation and takes good care of actioning on the data. And while in the past, in our deeper history, we did provide some of these capabilities built inside the platform. They were strong capabilities for organizing, for self-organizing networks. We thought that with this mobility challenge that we cannot enforce a replication of the automation systems. We cannot have, operators don't want to have any silos or systems that run in parallel and sometimes contradict in the sense of sending the networks the fixing commands or the optimization commands emerging from two separate insight systems. So our approach for this automation or for actioning on the data was to integrate with the existing tool stack. So the largest providers of those automation systems, network optimization systems, we partnered with them to provide the insights that we have for mobility, now capable of moving things around, but under the framework of these systems, not our own. So this is an approach we took as a vendor that weighs in, on what's important, what's less important, and what makes sense for the operators at the end of the day, if they want to leverage the mobility insights that we can give them.
Yeah, definitely. Great. So Mariam, what's your point of view on this? Obviously, you guys are kind of maybe on your stage 2 of analytics.
Yeah, and I'll try to address the specific question, which is about why now, right?
Yeah.
My view is we simply have to. We now have a burning platform. Honestly, I mean, we are not, as a telco operator industry, we're not going to survive if we do not adapt to the changing needs, if we do not take now the data properly into account and make sure that, as I mentioned first, on the customer demand side, there is a requirement for it. There's a demand to make sure that they really adapt to the exact needs, which means you have to do a lot of analytics to find out what those exact needs are. But also as a business, our margins are under stretch. Yeah, so revenues going down, customers expecting to have full connections and full connectivity with minimal money. So you pay less for your communication that you use all the time than you do for some other basics. If you going to a restaurant or whatever. So the demand has just changed so much, putting a lot of pressure on the business, which means if we do not optimize with analytics for where to put our money to get the highest value back, we're simply not going to survive. And I think that's what is going to make us be successful in the analytics domain today, compared to, as you said, for the last 10 years, there's been discussions about data platforms and cloudification, and none of this is new. However, now we simply have to.
Yeah, okay. So it's a little bit of a where there's a will, there's a way, and the will is much stronger now than it was a few years ago. Right. What's your view, Rob? Would you echo that, or what's your perspective?
I think Mariam has it completely spot on. We are not, as mobile network operators, we are not in a position where we can stay doing things in a traditional way or an old-fashioned way. We have to react to what our customers want and expect. We have to do things in a smart way. We have to do things that really, push us to the front of our customers. And I suppose, like, delighting our customers is something that we have in our heads, in terms of being able to give them an experience that they're pleasantly surprised by, as opposed to being disappointed by. And if we have all this capability now with the advancements in machine learning and AI and automation that can take, the data resources that we have and really kind of push us to the front of driving that forward, it's, I mean, no one will stay in business if they're ignoring those opportunities,
Yeah. I mean, from STL's point of view, I would say that echo everything that you guys are saying, but it's also, not just about doing the connectivity, it's about doing a lot more. How can you leverage your unique positions and your assets to bring something new to your customers? If you want to delight them, a pure fantastic connectivity is, everyone's come to expect that. What we want is something, new and exciting and more. And I think that this brings on to a question that I had prepared for you guys and from the audience, which is, and I think, touches on Assaf's experience about, what is the opportunity between telecoms and the automotive industry or the transport industry? How can you guys leverage the analytics capabilities that you're developing to bring new services to market? And I guess maybe start by Assaf, hear about what you think those new services that you could support telecoms operators to bring to market are, and then kind of turn to Mariam and Robert to get your perspective on, is that something that you think is viable from your perspective that you're pursuing? So Assaf, let's hear from you first.
Yeah. So I'll be very short here. So the opportunity that we believe is right there and sits exactly between the operators and the OEMs, the car manufacturers and the automotive sector, is exactly about forecasting the state of the connectivity on the roads and on the routes that the cars take. In this case, we leave aside the railroads, right? And that's not important for the automotive. But if so many features in the cars are practically riding on a perfect cellular connection with high throughputs and with low latency, and if only that was the constant mode of the network along everywhere the car traveled or drove, that would be perfect. But it's not the case, right? It's not the case. And even with 5G, the gaps that are there between the more recent technologies and then the 5G, they would still be there. So the predictability about how the car will consume the data services of the mobile network, that's where I believe the value is for the automotive. So our colleagues and our friends from the telco industry, Rob, Mariam, would be able to benefit by knowing the state of the roads much better, to the details of the brand of the car that they service, or to the detail of the modems that are there consuming the services off of the cars, and not just know, but actually, on the one hand, cater for that and modify and optimize and use certain techniques to enable the cars that are on their networks to get a better service, but also to then extend this and even have the data massaged and managed and consumed by the cars themselves. Imagine a navigation technique that tells you not just where the toll roads are or where the traffic jams are going to be, but also where a high throughput, low latency connection is going to be there for remote controlling the car off of an autonomous driving mode, or great HD video services for the kids in the backseat. I'd be willing to take a 10-minute, maybe even an hour detour on the family drive to the holiday vacation. I'd be willing to do that if that serviced well the passengers. So the opportunity there to extend the knowledge and the insights that we have from the operators to the OEMs, car manufacturers.
Thanks, really interesting. So I know, Mariam, obviously, you know, when you were introducing the digital transformation that you guys are going for, a big part of that was, you know, being able to simplify things and develop, you know, a lot wider range of available services for your customers that they could access more easily. Are the kinds of things that Assaf was talking about, is that kind of what you have in mind, or are you looking somewhere different?
You know, when I think there's two lenses to it, so it's not so simple answer, Amy. I think one is connectivity-based one, which indeed, I mean, towards our B2C customers, so the consumer business is indeed related to, you know, a lot of the things that Assaf was talking about, to make the right decision on where you put your site, what is the movement of your customers, where are, you know, or what is the quality of service you want to have on the roads versus other places, etc. And then there is a second angle to it, which comes a bit with let me say, mainly with 5G, which is call it more customized connectivity. For example, for private networks, which you can, you know, accommodate for with network slicing. And so this is, for me, the next level of connectivity, which really comes with the new era of the generation of connectivity. And then there is a third part, which also partly, I think, Assaf, you touched upon, which are completely new services. And that I would not currently not touch as much within our digital transformation. We do touch upon the system landscape, of course, in order to accommodate for it. But I think these are more solutions, end-to-end solutions that need to be developed, for example, for the industry 4.0. You now have IoT-driven, you know, factories. How do you bring not only the connectivity there, but also how do you bring additional services for them, allowing them to have, you know, a connected screwdriver. Yeah, as soon as you do the screwing, you kind of automatically send the information back to the center, who can tell you exactly what is the pressure, what else you can do, and maybe even connect it to other devices, yes, to get a proper IoT. And so I think this is, it really is a bit of evolution, meaning, you know, the connectivity developed with 5G, then making customized connectivity, and then last, new services that you need to, that we as operators need to tap into in order to get also revenue sources and support the industry business.
Thanks, Mariam. It's really helpful. So I want to, you know, I've got one question, and I want to put it to Rob, obviously, because you're really thinking about the development of the network in particular. Do you feel that the stuff that you're doing is, preparing you for the complexity of 5G networks that are coming? Do you think that you guys are ready? Are you there? Because there's a lot of chat about, the level of complexity that is coming, and operators are not prepared for that based on the level of analytics they've adopted so far. I wonder what your perspective is on that one.
Yeah, I think we're very firmly in the mindset of that. I think this is where we're pushing towards, and even touching back to what Mariam and Assaf have just been discussing there. I mean, what we're looking at right now and what's really going to develop with 5G in the coming years is that we're now seeing this like really key convergence between services and industries and mobile network operators through connectivity,
Yeah.
So as Mariam was saying, there's the whole smart manufacturing wave that will be driven by mobile private networks, for example, maybe some as a standalone entity, some as a hybrid entity. A lot of those are going to rely on maybe, network slicing in different formats in the actual environment of the smart manufacturing facility, but maybe with a hybrid connection out to the public mobile network, and kind of connectivity there. For ourselves, I mean, Assaf has mentioned a lot about the automotive industry, for example, and what's happening there in terms of optimizing motorways and roads. We're even engaging in things like drone corridors, even above the motorways. So even looking at optimizing our radio network to support specific drone corridors, maybe from parts of Ireland out to some of the offshore islands, for example. So we're looking at that in parallel with what's happening at ground level on the motorways. And
so you're kind of preparing yourself for the advent of all of these new services by, trialing them out and what the optimization of your network looks like for them as you're going along. That's how you're preparing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, there's no point in my mind, there's no point in 2 years' time or 18 months' time when maybe you're looking at your 5G standalone core in operation and scratching your head. And at that point, thinking about all these things, we need to have a roadmap of standalone, non-standalone. What are the behaviors in the network that we want to support? Be that, the traditional mobile and smartphone behaviors, smart manufacturing, the IoT space, drone deliveries offshore, all these kinds of services, and they need to be classified. They need to be mapped out. They need to have a view of how are we going to do all these things, and that's very much where we are right now. It is, it is an evolving journey. I suppose we don't have all the answers right now. We don't have all the data sources right now. We don't even have all the functionality right now. But at least we are looking down that road and identifying, well, here's what we want to be able to look at and learn. And for sure, there's maybe things we don't know yet. And we'll pick them up along the way. But very firmly, the mindset is there to tackle these things. Great.
So we have 1 minute left. So I think that very quickly, literally one sentence, can I get you each to say, if you, one takeaway about what's your lesson on deploying, actually, I'm really sorry, guys. I've been told I have to finish at 10:40 and I've already chatted through the last few minutes. So I don't think there's time to get your final contributions, although I would have loved them. But so far it's been fantastic. So thank you all so much for participating, and really sorry I couldn't get your last input to wrap everything up.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you everybody so much.